You're listening to episode number 5 of the Play Your Position podcast.
Welcome to the Play Your Position podcast, where your story matters and we make it count. Here's your host, Mary Lou Kaser. Let's get started.
Hello, everyone. I am really excited to introduce my guest today, Cynthia Trevino. Cynthia, are you ready for kickoff?
I am so ready for kickoff, Mary Lou. Absolutely.
Awesome. In 2001, Cynthia co-founded Resonect, a management and social media and multicast marketing consultancy for hyper-growth firms. She's helped authors, small and mid-sized businesses to replace old-school marketing techniques with thought leadership programs that increase prospects and sales. She has worked with consumer startups to build their brands and acquire customers using smart social media. Prior to Resonect, Cynthia built 25-plus years of executive experience, including marketing and product management at AT&T, Copper Mountain Networks, and other early-stage tech companies. Cynthia, with this kind of amazing background, why don't we start off today's show with you sharing with listeners why you chose to position yourself in the tech world? What was it about this world of technology and brands and such that really attracted you?
I love getting excited and about projects and products. And when I was first in corporate America, I did a lot of operations work and, writing processes and training for using different systems. And then I started watching, when I was on cross-functional teams, I started watching the marketing people, and it would just seem like they were having fun because it's like, you do a campaign, you promote a new product, you do a launch, and it's fun. You get everyone involved, and there's a new story because it's a new technology, and it's going to help businesses do things faster, cheaper, better. So I really got to like that. And because I was in a giant corporation like AT&T at the time, I was able to just get to know people and just move around and get myself a job in marketing, which I just talked myself into a job in marketing, which I really hadn't done before. And I just loved it, and I haven't given up on it. And I guess technology is, when I was coming up in my career at AT&T, computers and telephones were coming together. That's how old I am. And that was pretty exciting because it's hard to think of now that we have Skype and phone as a walking television, fax machine, computer. But in the early 90s and late 80s, it was very new. It was fun to explain something new. So I just kind of got on this sort of the technology bandwagon.
You are currently running your own business and have been for quite some time. What led you to leave the position of a corporate employee and venture out on your own?
It was a series of things, and honestly, I don't think I would have done. I would have. My younger self would have never said, "Oh, wow, your older self is actually going to go out and be self-employed." I think for me, it was coming from corporate America, a giant company, going down to startups. I worked for a couple of different startups in the 90s and coming into 2000. And I realized that if the leader at the top, if the CEO isn't really up to the task, really isn't in the right job, that it's not a future for the company. And it was also during the bubble. It wasn't the the internet bubble, but it was the telecom bubble of the late 90s when there were a lot of companies doing new forms of telephony, and DSL was it was a high speed before there was a fiber and such. So it was a new technology, and there were just a ton of companies. And I just watched these bubbles, and I thought, my gosh, I'm sitting in the middle of a bubble. And I just realized that it's better to steer your own ship, because by the time I realized in one instance that the CEO really just wasn't up to the charter of growing the company the way the investors thought he should grow it. And they just did massive downsizes, and I could see it coming. So I just decided that, well, I may as well look for clients rather than looking for another position. So that's what I did. And it's fun. One of my friends who had left corporate America way before me had a really great saying a few months after she left. And she said, my worst day at my own company is better than my best day working for corporate America.
I like that. One thing you just said, Cynthia, that also really resonated with me and I think is a nice transition into our section, Move the Chains, when we're on the field now, the game's underway, and like a football team that's got a coach that just isn't working out, you were talking about a CEO of a company, and the players or the employees often are aware of that. They can see the writing on the wall. You're not winning many games. There's a lot of questioning and talking among the people. And so you decided it was time to switch teams and switch positions and move out on your own. And once you got out onto your own, why don't you talk a little bit about what were some of the challenges that you faced in your new position? You're out on the field. I mean, you knew work and you knew technology, but this was a new animal, so to speak, that you were facing. What were a couple of the biggest obstacles that you had to overcome to make that transition successful?
The hardest transition for me was because I'd always been on a team and I was always promoting another person or another product. And then all of a sudden it was time to promote myself. So I think that's a bit from my generation at any rate, being a baby boomer. I think that was common for some women in my generation. But just getting used to the fact that it was my own logo on the card and it wasn't AT&T or some other tech company. That was a big shift for me, and talking about what I was excited about, because when you talk about what you love, you do get excited. But so that was a big shift, learning to self-promote and just getting used to the fact that's your life when you're self-employed. And I think the second thing was really realizing that you have to be a smart networker in terms of meeting people and relationship building. And it took me a little while to figure out the dynamics of what were the networking events to attend, which were the best groups. There's a certain dynamic and rhythm to networking groups, and where you go to develop new business and find partners or find clients. So that was tough. I think now it's very clear, wherever you are, keep your network going outside of it, whether you're on your own, self-employed, or whether you're inside a big company or any kind of company. You've got to keep your own network going that's completely independent of those other relationships. That's what took me a while. So my biggest lessons are just always be building your network, always be building relationships. Just make sure that you realize if you're going out on your own, just, get your own value prop, your own, look and feel in terms of in your mind, how you want to promote yourself or present yourself for the kinds of problems you solve for people.
I like that too. Something you said, Cynthia, that really struck a chord with me, and I think will with a lot of listeners, is this idea of feeling comfortable with self-promotion. I know you said that it might be something of your generation, a baby boomer. I'm not so sure. I think that self-promotion for women and some men remains difficult. Considering how the climate of networking has changed with social media, with the internet, and that's the kind of business that you're in, would you talk a little bit about some of those changes in the way we connect with people that you've witnessed, and what some of the challenges and also the benefits of these changes have been from your vantage point as a business owner with these kinds of technologies?
The real thing now, I believe, for anyone at whatever kind of work they're doing, whether it's self-employed or they're on a company team, social media is a skill. Everybody needs to learn social media. Everyone needs to be smart about it, because that's how you're judged. Let's face it, all of us, I do the same thing. As soon as I meet someone or someone says you should meet this person, or someone sends me a LinkedIn invite, I Google them. Or I look at their website, even Twitter, even on, you go, oh, this is interesting. You just want to make sure that there's some common thread. And it doesn't have to be totally professional. It could be because you're both really foodies, or you're both into the Coen brothers films. Social media is a skill. I honestly believe it. Just if you're going to be in any kind of business, you're going to be in any kind of profession, you need to perfect your networking, in-person networking, and social media, which is online networking. Also, all these things we hear about being content creators. If you're in business, you're a content creator, right? For that reason, there's 3 essential skills you absolutely have to perfect. You're going to be in business: social media, in-person networking, and creating content. Now, the good news is, and the trends that I see is, because one of the things a lot of my clients, business owners, would say, I'm not a writer, Cynthia. Oh, I don't know what to talk about. I don't want to do a blog for my company because I can't write. So the good news is now with technology, it's so easy to make videos. It's so easy to make podcasts like we're doing now and talk about how you help people solve problems and change the names to protect the innocent. But it's like, well, company A and entrepreneur B did this, and this is the results they got, and this is what they learned. So you share things, and it's really about sharing knowledge and sharing experiences that are going to save somebody else time, money, and frustration.
I completely agree with you and have seen it firsthand. The one thing that I sometimes hear, I don't hear it as much anymore, but I hear it still, is a reluctance to embrace the new technology only because people see it as something else they have to do, something else that's on my plate. I wonder if you have seen this kind of thing as well, where there's almost a resentment that now not only do I have to do my job or my business, but I also have to do this whole other thing with Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube, and then there's podcasting. So people get overwhelmed. What is your advice to people who come to you and have that overwhelmed perception? What is it that you say to them to help them really see the forest for the trees?
I do. I hear that all the time. And everybody's different. Some people will say to me, well, can't I just hire an intern to do social media? Well, you can't until you understand it yourself, because social media isn't just what you had for lunch, as we all know. It's what your value proposition is, how you help people in your industry solve problems, how you help them meet goals. So you have to be very clear, because social media is really just like networking in person. You wouldn't send an intern to go and network for you at a networking event, right? Social media it's who you are. I hate to use the terms like branding and value proposition, but that's really who it is, because the essence of who you are and what you offer in your business, or even if you're representing another company in a product or service, social media is what you offer. It's who you are. It's the identity. And it's very important. So what I tell people, business people who do feel overwhelmed, and I feel overwhelmed myself at times because it is a lot to do, is 2 things. One, first decide what your plan is. It's much easier. And if you don't want to do all of social networks at once, pick 1 or 2. Make sure that your customers, your audience, your partners, whoever your target audience is, make sure they're using that platform. And then find tools that you are comfortable with to save time. And I think the 4th step is decide what else you're going to quit doing. Because I think as business owners, we start, and business people, there's so many things we're just used to doing, right? And we never go back and say, okay, what can I leave out? What can I stop doing? What is no longer providing as much value, and make a trade-off? But it's very hard, because I think it's just a human nature to just keep taking on more and more without stepping back and saying, how can I use technology to make my life more sane? And what are my real priorities? And is there anything I'm doing that I can either delegate to someone or just quit doing? And what's the worst thing that's going to happen if I quit doing X, Y, Z?
I love that too, Cynthia, because the inclination is to take more on rather than let go of things, to make room for what's new. And that's part of growing and changing. And we've been in a time in the last few years where it's been a real whirlwind of change. It's come at us really quick. It's kind of like you just stepped onto the field and the whole offensive line is running down, and you haven't even turned to figure out where you're going to stand, and suddenly you're just getting mauled by this giant pile of expectation and so forth. And I really like what you said, is to take on 1 or 2 and mirror what your target audience is using, because there's no reason to be on Twitter if your audience isn't there. Why would you spend time and money to promote something to a room that's got nobody in it? Doesn't make any sense. So I want to have you take the ball into the end zone and share with us a time when you made a touchdown in your business, something really worth celebrating. You may have struggled to get there. It's 30 seconds on the clock. It's the fourth quarter, and you're staring at a 3-point deficit, and you were able to get that ball past the defense and into the end zone for a touchdown.
That experience came just as a big project I had. It was a law firm. It was in like the American Law 200, a mid-sized law firm. And I've been working with them on projects for a few years. And then they made organizational changes and they staffed up. And so that contract came to an end. And I hadn't done enough to fill my own funnel for going forward. So that was about the time when social media was just kicking in. And my first feeling was, even though I started blogging early and I was early onto Twitter, but I felt, well, I'm not an expert, so how can I help other people with social media? But what I discovered is that there really are no experts because social media is constantly evolving and changing. But what made the difference for me is I found a couple of clients who were already convinced. It was like my ideal avatar, your customer avatar, your ideal customer profile, the person that is the very best for you to work with, that can benefit the most by your service or your product. I decided I wanted to work with entrepreneurs who had decided that social media was going to be a tool to help them grow their companies. And because there weren't very many of them at the time. And when I made that subtle shift in deciding I'll only work for these sorts of projects with people who have decided that social media is a valuable tool, it made a huge difference because they were open to learning. They didn't know about it. And so I was able to really help a couple of companies. One of them was a startup and on a really limited budget. So we just did what we could to build up their Facebook fans and to build up their Twitter. And interestingly, when the entrepreneur, the founder, was presenting to private investors to go for his next round of funding, that was part of the story, was that the social media had captured followers and people that were interested in the product and where it was going. I've always been careful to not use any of the automated tools. I do everything organically, and I advise people to, because it's unless you're Coca-Cola or another giant brand, you don't need a million or multiple millions of followers. You need a few hundred or a couple of thousand people who are really interested in what you're doing. So I don't use anything automated. So that was pretty exciting for me, that social media progress that the startup had made, part of what the investors were interested in. That was cool.
That is very cool. And again, so many nuggets that you're sharing, Cynthia. The one that I really honed in on that you just said was, you don't need a million fans or followers to build a lucrative business. I think there's a number envy that people sometimes get, and they see different name brands or big names in the entrepreneurial space, and they look at their Twitter feed or they look at their Facebook business page and think, oh my gosh, they have 100,000 or they have 2 million or whatever, and begin to think, I'll never get that. Why should I try? Nothing could be further from the truth. That you've seen it in action, that if you have a highly focused group of people that knows, likes, and trusts what you're putting into the marketplace, that can be the foundation to a very sustainable business. And so as we bring this conversation to an end, I want to give you an opportunity to share with listeners today a couple of key offensive strategies straight out of the Cynthia Trevino playbook that they can take and implement right now to move the chains of their lives and businesses forward and get into the end zone.
First one is just get used to the fact that you're a content creator. Find the medium that works for you. If you like to talk, if you like to video, if you like doing PowerPoints and speaking over them, create content. No matter where you are in your business or your career, it's probably going to shift. And you want content so that when someone Googles your name, Sally Brown, George Smith of Atlanta, or you want them to see who you are. You want them to see your best work, your best thinking. You want to be a thought leader And it's so much easier now than it's ever been. You don't have to wait to be quoted in the Wall Street Journal. You don't have to wait until your local newspaper comes and interviews you. You can put your story, your message, educate your audience, and then when people are searching, they'll find you, or they're Googling your name or using whatever search engine of choice. Find the medium to create content that you're the most comfortable and just create it. I think if we all get used to the fact that social media is here to stay, publishing and technology are only going to get faster, easier, and it's a very noisy world out there. So in order to be heard, you need to be where your audience is. It's a business skill of creating content, putting your message, your story, the value you add, where your audience is going to be. It's an ongoing process. Don't ever stop.
We are all content creators is priceless information. And it's a pretty new concept. So I'm so grateful that you shared that, because people need to hear it over and over again. We are all content creators, and there are so many different venues for creating that content. And it's really just a matter of figuring out, like you said, your value proposition, your story, and then picking the channel that's right for you and going from there. And speaking of channels, Cynthia, what is the best way for people to connect with you? Where is Cynthia Trevino hanging out online?
Okay, online, I am on Twitter at CY Trevino. That's C like Charlie, Y like yes, T like Tom, R Robert, E Edward, V Victor, INO, CY Trevino. That's my Twitter handle. And then I blog at smallcompanyBigImage.com. So I'd love for people to send me what's their biggest hurdle to becoming a content creator, what their biggest tip is for becoming a content creator, or if they disagree with me, let me know that too. If you don't think we're all content creators, let me know that too.
Love, love, love that. For listeners today, you will be able to find all of these amazing nuggets that Cynthia has shared at marylouKaiser.com/Cynthia Trevino. You'll find links to her Twitter page and her blog, as well as her wisdom and insights. And Cynthia, I cannot tell you how much fun I've had today listening to your ideas and your perspective. I appreciate the longevity that you shared. I think it's important for baby boomers particularly to impart the bigger picture of where we've been to where we are now, because I think right now there's definitely a trend towards the millennials and this young tech-savvy generation, and there are a lot of very young entrepreneurs. Part of my mission with what I'm doing is to bridge those gaps between generations and say, listen, we've all got things we can learn from each other. The young generation can teach about the technical skills, and the older generations, we've got some pretty good wisdom and perspective that is going to play into where you're headed, because if you want your company to be sustainable over the long term, these are some of the things you're going to need to know. And so I really appreciate your perspective and your wisdom, and I think listeners will as well. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. It was great fun, Mary Lou. And one last thought. I read something recently that there's a new term, because we hear a lot about mentoring of children, of course, and mentoring of early stage startup companies. And a person in my generation said that what we're really looking at now is reverse mentoring, because just as you said, bridging the gaps in the generations. So as somebody in my baby boomer like me, mentoring a younger early stage entrepreneur, somebody that's new in the professional world, business practices and growing and developing strategies. The reverse mentoring comes in when the younger person teaches the baby boomers like me about technology. So that's reverse mentoring. I don't know. I think it's kind of a cool term.
It is a cool term, and I will make sure that I include that in the show notes, because I think it's a term that is going to become more relevant the deeper into the tech world we go. So Cynthia, I want to wish you a wonderful day, and we will see you online.
Thanks, Mary Lou. You have a great day, too.
And that's a wrap. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Play Your Position podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's guest as much as I did. And remember, you can find the show notes from today's episode over at marylouKaiser.com/podcast. I would also so appreciate it if you would take a few minutes to leave me a quick 5-star review on iTunes so more people can find this program and benefit from the wisdom my guests share. I look forward to seeing you on future episodes, and in the meantime, it's a great day to get out there and play your position.
Thanks for listening to the Play Your Position podcast, where your story matters and we make it count at MaryLouKaiser.com.